Hello, I'm Jenny Pope. I'm an artist based in Edinburgh. I have a background in mental health and wellbeing, and I've worked both in community and hospital settings. So I make sculptures, and I have a fascination with the inescapable changes that happen in our internal lives and also externally in the natural environment. I use recycled materials, found materials, anything from old men's sheds and beaches and skips by the side of the road. I'm drawn to explore anxiety around the climate crisis and how to bring hope into these issues and our perception of survival. Today, I'm going to be describing my ongoing project, Buoyancy in Unprecedented Times. The inspiration from this project came from Stromness Museum in Orkney. It's a fabulous, eclectic place of island-related paraphernalia, loosely connected to marine, domestic and community life on the islands. What struck me most was one item, a rather dishevelled, dark brown, perished rubber, musty oilskin form of an inflatable boat. It was described as an Halkett airboat built in the 1940s. It's just big enough to fit one person. Patched cloth, a contrivance which also becomes a cloak when on land. What I remember was the homemadeness, the sofa-like vulnerability destined for the open seas. The human scale of this fragile vessel reminded me of our own current predicament in the midst of a climate crisis and the uncertainties ahead as we navigate unknown futures. What might we need in times ahead? Maybe a lifeboat, supplied with a survival kit for both physical and emotional emergencies. We will need to steady our nerves, face the future journey head on, with a clear mind and an open heart, to remain buoyant and resilient. Buoyancy in Unprecedented Times is my practice-based research project, centering activism within my art making, extending my ongoing commitment to reconsider my practice as a tool to make a difference in the face of the climate emergency. I use the metaphors of floating and buoyancy as essential strategies for emotional resilience in the face of our unknown future. So for the first iteration of the ideas in the project, in 2023, I was part of a residency programme for Art Walk Porty, which is a community event in Edinburgh, and it was funded by Creative Scotland. For this residency, I made a boat, my carrier of hope, ideas and intent. A coracle, a basket-like vessel, ubiquitous, accessible, steeped in history, and almost a little bit ridiculous. The generosity of countless people, usually men, to share their knowledge from their workshop sheds by making YouTube videos about coracle building and woodworking skills enabled me to construct a fine object, sculpture, vessel, coracle on my kitchen table. During the residency, I had conversations with local residents about living by the sea and the tension between loving being there and knowing that things will change. Sea levels will rise. I collected donated clothes to create a collective skin of the coracle, a communal protection from the elements. I formed the hull of the boat from steaming, flexing and binding strips of wood into a fragile yet usable, water-worthy craft. Naming the coracle was a challenge, so I gave it two names, Adrift and Response. Response because it's a more considered action than react. Adrift because, as Nick Thorpe, a coach and coracle lover, says, in a volatile and changing world, we're arguably adrift rather more than we think. The very wise and erudite Rebecca Solnit has written, it's important to say what hope is not. It is not the belief that everything was, is, or will be fine. The evidence is all around us of tremendous suffering, and tremendous destruction. The hope I'm interested in is about broad perspectives with specific possibilities, ones that invite or demand that we act. It's also not a sunny, everything is getting better narrative, though it may be a counter to the everything is getting worse narrative. You could call it an account of complexities and uncertainties with openings. There's me in my coracle. The launch event was a celebration of living by the sea, our companion on good days, stressful days, lonely days, and playful days, to acknowledge the huge mental and physical well-being benefits from swimming on any day of the year. The launch ceremony was led by a celebrant. We sang, listened to poems, walked, swam, floated, paddled, chatted, and ate cake. And I'll show a video about this afterwards, after I've talked. My hope for the coracle was to convey the wobbly, uncertain journeys we all face ahead, supported with the assistance of many communal, buoyant helping hands. This year's iteration of the project has come through conversations with Jonathan Baxter, the embedded artist at St Mary's Episcopal Cathedral in Edinburgh, and an invitation to create an installation. My initial feeling was one of overwhelm, the scale, the grandeur, with every object loaded with meaning. I was drawn to the fossil rock steps. A small detail reminded me of my childhood fascination with all things rock-like. Expanding from this connection, another way into a meaningful response for me became the altar as a hugely significant space, both in that location and in its wider meaning. The steps in the altar are fascinating. They're absolutely stunning. Marble, polished, graphic, black and white details of abundant marine life, including a large, now extinct, solitary coral. It's limestone from the Carboniferous period, 325 million years ago, when the UK was close to the equator. I also understand that whilst alive, some corals grow at one surface line a day, creating a timepiece frozen within the rock where they became fossilized, a deep time daily record. This made me think about our current timescales that we live within, and how we sit alongside the deep time of our Earth. My response was to create contemporary fossils. I've drawn a connection between our current climate crisis and the potential impending extinction of wildlife in real and imminent timescales with a deep time fossil species and their extinction. A stark fact is that scientists predict that coral reefs that we now have in the seas will be extinct by 2050 due to sea temperatures rising. This has posed a series of questions for me, which form the core driver for making this artwork in this location. For me, the altar signifies a moral compass, and I wonder, how do we acknowledge the moral wound of exploitation of our land and our seas? What do we need to do in order to heal and regenerate them? Are we hiding in plain sight of the facts? Where does the concept of sacrifice connect here? Are we keeping ourselves safe at the expense of other species? The sacrifice of animal and non-human life forms? Where is there a God in this uncertain world? Are we examining our morals, seeking guidance and acting as best we can as individuals and communities? These questions are offered as provocateurs, invitations, openings to discussion, where this artwork is an initial part of a dialogue with the viewers. As always with my work, words and titles play a significant part in accessing the ideas behind the pieces. I have named it the Crisisium Humanitaris, created by us humans, deadly serious and also surreal and absurd. I began to wonder what our human fossils might look like in the future. What would be left of us? Not so much in a literal skeleton and bones sort of way, but in a metaphorical way, something to suggest our brief time on this planet and what might be laid down. I started to imagine forms like cocoons, shells of protection, hiding within something, clothes as our current second skin, our outer public layer, our signifier of status and belonging. I'm also aware of the connection, especially in the religious context of the cathedral, of shrouds, our final second skin. In response to all these fragments of ideas, I decided to create a type of cocoon, cloak, shelter, container on a human scale. To use my own body as a reference for size to try on as I went about their construction, using charity shop clothes patterns and dressmaking techniques. I made a conscious decision to use waste plastic in the construction of the forms. Plastic is a ubiquitous material, ever present and almost permanent, shiny and alluring on one hand, cheap, nasty and dangerous on the other, an indelible imprint of our existence far into the future. For the installation process, we use very tall ladder scaffolding system, platforms and trapdoors around 2 lines across the width between the pillars in the cathedral, and then hung vertical threads off these to hang individual forms. A completely stressful situation, which I didn't really imagine until we did it. And perhaps the most potent place within the cathedral, the view is temporarily altered. The pieces waft, float, and dance. The light shines through and is reflected off them. The large circular form partly obscures and partly frames the figure of Jesus at the altar. The contradictions, paradoxes, and anomalies are exposed. The questions remain in the air. So if I'm moving on now to think about my current piece of work, in terms of my Buoyancy project, this involves taking artwork back to Orkney in partnership with some local organisations there. We're in the process of planning an art science project with components which could include a floating sculpture in the harbour, measuring temperature and salinity, local community groups making some intentional habitats, and using some of the beach cleanup material found locally. And that's a working diagram of my head, what goes on. I'm keen to collaborate with marine or coastal organisations, as I believe that having an art component enables audiences to relate with serious environmental information in a way which is accessible, can produce behaviour change. And I would love to work alongside researchers and scientists to develop together thought-provoking responses to key issues. So there was a video made during the launch event at Art Walk 40. It's a video made by Rachel McKinn.
So we've got swimmers, welcome swimmers. We've got singers. If you're a singer, put your hand up. Yeah. And everybody is actually a singer.
Buoyancy in Unprecedented Times is an artwork by Jenny Pope. A boat, a coracle, a fragile vessel in which to face our unknown journey, head on, with resilience, a clear mind and an open heart. The coracle has 2 names, Adrift and Response. Response because it's a more considered action than react. Adrift because in a volatile and uncertain world, we are rather more adrift than we think. In a watery event hosted by Art Walk Porty on the 10th of September 2023 at Portobello Beach, the boat made its maiden voyage, accompanied by swimmers, rowers and singers, symbolising the wobbly, uncertain journeys we all face ahead during the climate crisis, supported by communal, buoyant, helping hands.
Domestic and community life on the islands. What struck me most from the museum, and the whole trip actually, was one item, destined for the open seas, of the audacity of the user, explorer Dr. John Ray, to take it out across Arctic waters in unknown territory, looking for the survivors of the lost Franklin expedition.
Chasing the wobbling coracles of light, creature of fluid boundaries, I watched day drown, knowing, like Noah, new lands will rise like growling whales.
Thank you.
This is a kombucha from Josephine. Thank you, Josephine. I name this boat Adrift. I name this boat Response.
Gently touch down to earth and ocean, sand and rolling sea, wind and motion, fiery burned in me. Sail away, gently touch down to Have a look over there. Don't really much. Blessed vastness of my being, I offer myself to you. This is a way. to land. I believe there is food and refreshments up in the circle again. Maybe let the swimmers have first dibs in the hot.
Want to go? Nobody's looking.
I know, that was lovely. There was a plan about the weather changing it.
So you're helping.